Hello and good morning, everybody. For our training Tuesday. My name is Derek Reeves, Procurement Training Specialist for CPOGS. And today, um, I would like to welcome you and thank you again for tuning in to our training Tuesday. Today, we will have the return of our guest speakers for part two of our up training on joint purchasing methods and the Governmental Joint Purchasing Act 30 ILCS 525. And then we'll have a fun fact of the day. It's we're trying not to keep it too long because we have a fun filled packed information just to get out to you guys. Okay. Just a mental note, I wanted to let everybody know in case you, just a reminder, in case you missed last week's Training Tuesday, our new link for Training Tuesday has been published on our website. We always want you to have the up to date and current information that we can provide. Okay. All right. At this moment, I don't want to hold you guys any longer. We'll go ahead and get our training. Go ahead and get it beginning. I'm gonna pass it over to Cassandra so she can share some wonderful information for you guys.
All right, good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you all for being with us for part two. If you missed last week's training, please be sure to visit the training center to catch up on the discussion on joint purchases, joint purchase master contracts, and release off multiple award master contracts. We will ask that if you have any questions during our presentation today, that you please hold them until the end of this presentation, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have on what we've covered. So with that said, Derek, do you want to get us started?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. I greatly appreciate that. Um, Again, hello everybody. This diagram that we see right here illustrates the different purchasing methods, who leads them, and ultimately who can utilize the resulting contract. And today we'll review, cooperative-led contracts, the differences between piggyback and participation, and review some frequently asked questions at the same time. Okay. Um, So, cooperative led joint purchases are joint purchases led by an upvetted, approved federal agency, consortium, group purchasing organization, or cooperative. In simple terms, a cooperative purchasing involves, sharing procurement contracts between governments. And, and when an agency wants to use a contract or participate in a solicitation led by a governmental entity, via an approved cooperative, they are seeking to conduct a cooperative led purchase or led joint purchase. Cooperative led joint purchases occur when agencies need to use executed contracts or current solicitations being executed or conducted by a cooperative. So, and at the moment, there are currently 15 approved cooperatives for use on the website. If the cooperative is not listed on that website, please contact your SPO to inquire about the vetting process. All right. So the vendors we use under these cooperatives must be registered in IPG in order to utilize and move forward for Illinois specific contracts. If the vendor is not registered and active in IPG, the up team will not approve the request form. Okay. We still need to consider BEP, small business set aside, and brand name justifications. These are all on both of the purchase request forms we will be discussing later in the training. There are two cooperative-led joint purchasing methods, and these include cooperative-led participations and piggybacks. Now, our cooperative-led participations occur when an Illinois agency wants to participate in a cooperative solicitation and use the resulting contract with a cooperative awarded vendor, or in some case, more than one vendors. So, cooperative participation is, the preferred cooperative-led joint purchasing method because it allows us to post a notice of the cooperative solicitation to Illinois vendors who are then able to bid on the cooperative opportunity. We are also able to include the state of Illinois terms and conditions at the time of solicitation. So And the resulting contract from a cooperative participation could be a JPMC or it could be agency specific. So it is a possibility that one of the JPMC enabled agencies are able to participate in the cooperative solicitation and have the resulting contract be a JPMC. So, and something else just to keep in mind is that the term of the resulting contract can match the cooperative master contract term. So let's say the co-op contract expires December 31, 2026. Our contract can extend to December 31, 2026 as well. And to utilize a cooperative-led participation, the agency is required to complete a cooperative participation purchase request form. However, for cooperative-led participation contracts, BEP is required. So we utilize the goal setting worksheet to set appropriate goals, and the vendor must comply with or make a good faith effort towards meeting the goal to be considered for a state of Illinois contract. If there is a goal, that vendor must complete a BEP utilization plan. If a vendor refuses the goal, we are not able to utilize that vendor for a cooperative-led participation contract. Once the cooperative participation purchase request form has been approved, the agency should follow, the bid buy process. So we post a notice of award and will be responsible to negotiate their own participating addendum and contract that includes the state of Illinois terms and conditions. A state agency may piggyback onto a contract that has, already been procured by a federal agency, consortium, group purchasing organization, or cooperative. So these contracts are a result from procurements in which the agency did not participate in the solicitation or award. Like all other contracts we have, we've been discussing so far, piggybacks can also be either JPMC or agency specific. So unlike cooperative-led participation contracts, piggybacks are generally limited to a one-year term with very minimal exceptions. Even though the cooperative contract was procured, competitively, we are trying to minimize, the contract opportunities that Illinois vendors who may only, be monitoring the state's bulletin may not have been notified about. Additionally, these contracts, do not consider Illinois compliant goals like those for diverse or veteran businesses. So it's been a policy decision to promote Illinois participation. Now, there can be, special circumstances in which a term could be longer or additional piggyback term can be considered. For example, let's say an agency has posted multiple solicitations with no response or responsive vendors. So one of the examples I could think of is the CPOGS small package delivery solicitation. The UP team solicited for this 4 times over 2 years, and we didn't even have a responsive vendor. In such instance, such as this, a longer term, was considered. So another example is like if you have an existing contract that expires in 15 months, and this contract is complementary to it, a special request can be made to align the 2 contracts while competitive solicitation is being completed. Okay. So to utilize a cooperative-led contract, the agency is required to complete a piggyback purchase request form. And for piggyback contracts, a BEP is encouraged. We utilize the goal setting worksheet to set appropriate goals, and we are required to ask or encourage the vendor to comply with the set goal. Now, however, if a vendor refuses the goal, we document the refusal, and the procurement may move forward. If the vendor accepts any part of the goal, a BEP utilization plan would be completed once the piggyback purchase request form has been approved, just like the cooperative participation process. The agency completes the bid buy process, posting the notice of award, and negotiates the participating addendum and contract. So all state of Illinois terms and conditions must be included in this type of contract as well. I know Sometimes the question is, what method do we use? And here's a good way to think about it. When an agency has determined a need, a competitive contract may have been, considered, but they would like to check additional options. We would first check to see if there is a JPMC available for use. If there is not a current JPMC in place, the next thing we would check is if there are any contracts that the state of Illinois participated in. The good news is we have created some, quick reference guides and links to these contracts, which now makes it easier to do a quick search for available JPMC and participation contracts. So if both of these options have been checked and there isn't a contract that meets the need, then a piggyback contract could be considered. And remember, as stated before, piggyback contracts are generally limited to 1 year. So we should think of a piggyback contract like a temporary Band-Aid solution, right? The piggyback method could help to avoid emergency contracts or to buy some time for agencies to complete their own long-term competitive contract. So, and at this moment, I want to turn it over to Josh to speak on our piggyback and cooperative participation purchase request forms. Josh, would you like to take it away?
Sure thing. Thank you, Derek. So, like he mentioned, I'm going to go over the forms that we use for this process. I'm going to say on the front end, I know we've asked for a lot of your time and given you a lot of information these last 2 weeks. So when I say the words form review, you might be tempted to zone out just a little bit. Please resist that urge, because once people know how to navigate the program, I would say the biggest delay that we see with these are a lack of familiarity with the forms and what kind of answers we're looking for. So please absorb as much of this as possible and ask questions at the end if you have them. So because these piggyback contracts are one of the least transparent procurement methods, we've added some additional questions to the request form to help us decide if piggybacking is appropriate for the situation. The questions that we're going to go over today are intended to provide maximum transparency and help the agency develop a sound justification to go the piggyback route versus utilizing a more traditional competitive solicitation. So I'm going to go over the form by section and highlight some of the questions and help you understand what we're looking for in our reviews. So for the first section, what we need to know is if a competitive solicitation has been considered. If not, why wasn't that option explored? If it was considered, why are we choosing to use the piggyback procurement method? Perhaps we tried competitive solicitations and we did not get the process completed, like the small package delivery example that Derek just used. So there could be a lot of different reasons. So we look at these on a case-by-case basis. And so that kind of ties back into what we talked about last week with involving the SPO early in the process, because again, determinations later down the line could slow this down. So next, we need to go ahead and detail whether or not the product or service being sought has been procured by the agency before. We used to have to go back in and check bid buy or ask for additional information regarding these, but now we've got it listed and ready right here so that we can decrease the review times. This information also helps the SPO advise the agency on choosing the best procurement method. So for example, if the SPO saw that there were 3 sole sources done and a piggyback's being sought, they would probably instruct the agency to utilize the sole source procurement method because that's a more transparent process. And so perhaps 1 or 2 piggyback purchases are listed, and in that case, we would probably want to use an alternate method of procurement that includes our terms and conditions. So again, as you see, these really are done on a case-by-case basis. So a lot of the information here in section 2 is administrative, mostly informational, and can be found by simply reviewing the contract materials provided by the cooperative. But there are a couple of questions I'd like to draw some attention to and give you some more information on. So first, question number 8 asks, why was the selected vendor awarded a contract by the cooperative? So what we're looking for here is essentially the requirements that the vendor met to receive an award from the cooperative. Was it an RFP where their solution was evaluated and deemed acceptable? What did that evaluation process consist of? So give us some more information, on how they were chosen. Was it a case where all the vendors who met certain criteria were awarded? And if so, what did what would those criteria include? So we just need to be able to demonstrate that the vendor being chosen was originally awarded as part of a transparent, competitive process. Some of the cooperatives are nice to us and they provide us with the exact reason the vendor was chosen. So if you are using one of those cooperatives where you're able to get that information, please make sure to provide that also. Then moving down to numbers 13 and 14. So is the supply or service offered on a CMS or Do It Master contract? And if it is, why are we not using that contract? So what this does is helps the SPO gather more context on the situation. So obviously, if there's no master contract, that will help the agency justify why they need the piggyback. But even if there is one, there might still be a few reasons that we wouldn't use it. The biggest one I can think of is the examples when a master contract's expiring soon and there's delays in awarding the replacement contract. So we're looking at a gap in services. That would be a situation where a piggyback would be used to bridge that gap and help the agency meet its need. Okay, moving on to section 3. Section 3, the answer for number 1 is actually what goes into the contract as part of the specs or the scope. So we need you to be as descriptive as possible here. Anytime we're using contract terms, we want to get the scope and specs defined as much as possible. So give us as much information as you can. So the next question is number 2. Just wanting to know if the procurement is going to obligate the state to the vendor for future procurements. We have seen in the past where an agency will try to utilize a piggyback purchase request and will then anticipate a string of sole sources in the future to secure perpetual license or maintenance. We all have an obligation to conduct our procurements in the most transparent, competitive way possible. So we do not want to be using piggybacks that are going to obligate the state to future purchases. We don't want to string a bunch of sole sources together after we do a piggyback. So in a situation like that, we would be better served by completing a long-term competitive solicitation. Number 3, the next question is digging into pricing for the supply and service. You'll notice that it's using the word competitive. Because we do recognize in some instances, especially when you're procuring certain services, the lowest price probably isn't going to represent the best value. I shouldn't say probably. In some circumstances, may not represent the best value, but the pricing we need to show that it's competitive in the marketplace. So this is a section where we're seeing as much specific, quantifiable, objective, non-opinionated, however you want to define it. We need to see as much of that information as possible. So research the vendors' pricing amongst other awarded vendors. Were there, like a cloud solutions contract, there were 61 vendors, we awarded 6. If you're able to get pricing amongst that group, how does it compare? So you can also look outside the cooperative to a marketplace as a whole. How does the pricing compare within the marketplace? So this is really important in justifying the purchase. So make sure to include actual figures and details on the research process. By detailing the research process, we need to include where the information came from, what kind of research was done, and who conducted it. Preferably that would be, a person who is a end user or subject matter expert, in some way that will be able to decipher that information. And so lastly, for this section, we'll look at question number 4, which is actually a 2-part question. Why did the agency select this cooperative is the first question, and this vendor is the second. So if the suppliers or service were under a contract with multiple cooperatives, why did the agency select this particular one? And with multiple awarded vendors, how was this vendor chosen? Again, was it based on the lowest price? Was it based on overall value? Were there other factors like needing a specific vendor to work on proprietary software? It's again, another one of those questions where well-researched specific facts and figures will go a long way. So moving on to section 4, this covers the key BEP details. As you may recall from last week, and as Derek mentioned again, one of the main things that's going to differentiate a piggyback from participation is the fact that with a piggyback, our terms and conditions were not included up front. So this means that a vendor can refuse to meet a BEP goal. We do require that the agency ask and document appropriately one way or the other. So in the event that they would refuse the evidence, we would need evidence to that effect included in the procurement file. If the goal is accepted as established or there's a partial goal, so they're accepting some form of BEP, then we need to follow the same process as usual with the vendor U plan and all that. So please note that before the piggyback purchase request form can be approved, that step needs to be complete. So when it's required, we need to make sure we have the vendor's U plan attached at the rec stage before we can move forward and submit the form to the CPO for approval. Okay, and then so the cooperative, the little bit of a recap, participation request form is much like the piggyback purchase request form we just covered. So we'll go over them both. You need to confirm all the fields are completed and are accurate, and also go back through, the information we just talked about and make sure you're actually answering the questions as they're intended to be answered. So for instance, is the vendor's name complete or was it abbreviated? When the question is asked, why did the cooperative award this vendor? Again, did you use the reason that the cooperative provided? So they have many of these co-ops have an award summary that explicitly state why the vendor was awarded. If it's not available, you should review the RFP eval information to again give us details on what the evaluation process looked like, what led to that vendor being chosen. Again, the pricing, when you're asked the basis to ensure it's competitive in the marketplace, we don't want to see an answer that states that they did a competitive solicitation. We understand, the CPO office vets that approves these co-ops, so we know that these were done fairly competitively, so that doesn't really answer the question on why the pricing is fair. We're not asking you to spend, a whole bunch of time and get all hands on deck researching, but it is one of the common issues that we return request forms for, not having, some kind of information that we can compare against or at least justify the pricing. So please ensure there is a reason beyond just that it was competitively procured to the co-op. Next, remember the vendor has to be registered and active in IPG, and that's why the IPG number is required on the purchase request form. A quick recap on the BEP goal setting process has to be followed on both of them. So participation or piggyback, you start off the same way with BEP. You have to establish the goal. The agency is required to complete the worksheet to see if there should be one. If it's set, the goal should be presented to the vendor. Again, regardless of participation or piggyback, it's getting shown to the vendor. But the difference is on the piggyback, the vendor can refuse the goal. Again, if that's refused, they do need to document, or you do need to document that as part of the procurement file. But if a goal has been accepted, or in a case of participation where it's not an option, the completed U plan is needed. If the full goal can't be met on a cooperative participation, we do require a good faith effort. And so if we're presented with a cooperative participation purchase request form, that's a mouthful, that states the vendor denied the goal, then that request is going to be denied on a participation, again, because it's non-optional. On a cooperative purchase request form, the APO signs this form, but we need to point out on a piggyback purchase request form, it has to be the director that signs. I know a lot of forms are not only with procurement, but in general, they're able to designate or delegate that signature. That's not the case here. Piggyback, again, requires the signature of the agency director. So please see the job aid for the procurement type you choose and ensure all the required forms have been attached to the rec before you're sending it to your SPO, or your SPO is sending it through to the UP team for approval. And again, as a reminder, the SPO in conjunction with the UP team, we're always more than willing to preview any purchase request form prior to obtaining the signatures, so we don't have to volley it back and forth. So if you have questions about it, please ask up front rather than complete the whole thing and then you don't have to send it back. So at this time, I will go ahead and hand it back to Cassandra, who is going to go over a recap and some FAQs for us.
All right. Thank you both, Derek and Josh, for all the information you've shared so far. We have added some frequently asked questions and tried to include details and answers here in this PowerPoint. So we're not going to go into a deep dive on all of it. This will be attached to Training Tuesday, so you can always come back to it and keep it for reference. Just a quick overview and what we sent out on this, there is not, let me start. How do we find active JPMC's participation and piggyback opportunities? As stated previously, our JPMCs and our participation contracts are posted on a list on our website. If you have any additional questions about these, you could always contact your SPO. Piggyback opportunities are not actually listed anywhere. An agency would have to go through and check the cooperative's website for any contracts available. Most of those websites have keyword searches. If you're not able to find something, or if you have questions, again, you can contact your SPO for further guidance, and they should be able to assist you, or reach out to the UP team for further assistance. The SPO can. When you talk about contract renewals, there are no renewals on piggyback contracts. As stated, they're only a year long. They're just not renewable. Any state-led procurements can consider renewals, and our cooperative participations. We can use the length of the term that they are in. So if the cooperative contract offers a renewal and it has been exercised, we can use the renewed contract. Or if we are currently using a participation contract and our term ends, but the cooperative renews their contract, then we can go back and add the time to ours. But we have to consider that that renewal has to be executed on the cooperative's part before we can move forward with ours. Can an agency purchase something off of one of these types of contracts and then try to competitively procure maintenance? We're just going to tell you, if an agency wants to utilize one of these contracts, piggyback or participation, they need to consider their full need and find a solution that meets that need. We don't want to piece together different types of joint purchases for that purpose. If there isn't currently a master contract in place, agencies are allowed to use any available sourcing method to obtain their need. If there is a master contract in place, but an agency finds that utilizing a piggyback contract would be cheaper, we have to actually check each master contract to see if it even permits use of other methods. Some master contracts are restricted, and therefore this is a case-by-case basis. So we can't definitively say one way or another at this time. Can you piggyback off of an agency specific contract? So let's say an agency already procured something and you want to use it. We are actually not allowed to piggyback off of other agency contracts. So even if it was a joint purchase in the beginning, like the example of the parole tracking system provided last week, only those that are on the intent to participate and an initial solicitation, NOA, and contract can use that contract. We cannot add other contracts or agencies later to those. I also want to point out, based on our current Joint Purchasing Act, we're not allowed to use other state contracts for joint purchasing either. So agencies are only allowed to utilize approved cooperatives and consortiums already vetted. So just brief recap, because I know we're pushing up against time. I want to point out with both of these methods, there is a master contract via cooperative in place. There is not a state of Illinois contract. I think sometimes there's a misconception because there is an existing contract, but until the state of Illinois posts a notice of award and negotiates a participating addendum or contract for either piggyback or participation, the state does not have a contract with that vendor. So just keep that in mind. That is something we have to get to the process of, is a complete contract. Very important, piggybacks are limited to 1 year, very minimal exceptions. We must encourage that BEP, whereas participation can be longer terms and the BEP is required. Just make sure on your purchase request forms, we're completing the information that it is as accurate and complete as possible, just because that ensures a quicker review, more efficiency for us to get those back to you. And for that piggyback purchase request form, it has to be the director. It cannot be a designee or someone signing on behalf of the director. We will return the form for that. As always, if you need reviews, assistance, reach out to your SPO. We'll gladly review these forms for you to speed the process. Again, you'll find on this slide, last slide, all of our resources with links. Links are embedded throughout, so hopefully you can use this as a future guide. With that, I would like to open up to any questions that you have.
Looks like we have one in the chat box that says, when vendors do not engage a BEP vendor, but do engage a disadvantaged business registered in a different non-BEP program, what consideration is given as far as GFE?
So if it's a participation, it has to be one of our BEP registered vendors, just like on any other procurement. So it has to be registered with the state of Illinois BEP program. If it's a piggyback, they can use alternate vendors and refuse the BEP goal. Did that answer your question, or do we need additional information on that?
Said thank you.
All right. Is there any other questions that we can answer for you today? I know we covered a lot of material here today.
I don't see any more questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us over these last 2 weeks. We really appreciate you being here with us today. We give it back to you, Derek.
First of all, I would like to thank you so much for sharing all the great information about joint purchasing methods and the JPA Act. All this knowledge from the UP team. I'm sure this can and will be useful for many agencies. I know this was, again, a lot of information sent your way, but please take the time to review the recording and absorb this great information that was provided. Again, I'd like to provide this slide, let everyone know where they can find direct access to upcoming bid buy training, other procurement training opportunities, and direct access to our training center and CPOGS website. Just a little fun fact today. Today is National Taffy Day. So if you would like to enjoy some taffy, you deserve it. I know sometimes it's a little too much for my teeth, but I have to say it. Banana Laffy Taffy is so good, and I think it's the best. But I'm sorry I had to say that. I do want to thank you all for your time. I greatly appreciate it today. If you have any questions / comments, please don't hesitate to reach out. And remember, we are here to help. We greatly appreciate you guys.